Nestled in the countryside, about 3 miles away from a town called Holtwhistle, there is a castle, namely Featherstone Castle, which had accommodated Wild North in 2019 and was said to be the location for the 2020's event too. But due to the events this year, being at the castle has been an impossible venture. But that's not to say that we can't be there in other ways. And so, I want to do a little bit of history and insight into the Wild North location, and even delve into some of the more spooky stories surrounding the 11th century building. So let me take you on a journey. I will start off with some history and throw in some interesting facts and paranormal information at points that are interesting. And after doing a paranormal event in 2019 at the castle and having some interesting findings, I think there may be something for everyone interested here. The origins of Featherstone Castle date back to the 11th century, to a manor house that was on the site. This was owned by the Featherstone Howe family. They had ownership of the property for many years, and in the early 1300s, Thomas de Featherstone Howe had a tower built onto the castle, which is still standing to this day, I believe. The castle played its part in the unrest between Scotland and England over the many years of the battles in history, and because of its location near Hadrian's Wall, it was quite a stronghold in its own right. There are still remnants of the original building in parts of what are there now, and the original building there was of medieval origin and style. The building and the tower there were more or less unchanged over the years, until in the 1600s there was some reshaping and remodelling of the buildings there. Some features were kept the same, but some others were modified with improvements or to fit in with the period. The castle stayed under the ownership of the Featherstone Howe family for many years, up until the mid-1600s, where the buildings were confiscated from them by Parliament. This followed from Sir Timothy, who had been captured at the Battle of Worcester, and following this had been executed. From then, the castle was sold on to the Earl of Carlisle, who I believe had ownership for a few decades until it was bought back by the Featherstone Howe family around 1711, and becoming their property once again. There is an old legend there of the spirit of Abigail Featherstone Howe. Allegedly in the late 1700s, she was in love with one person, but also the interest of another person, and they both found out, and she was at the bridal meeting when she was getting married to one of them. And the story goes, as the procession was going around outside, the horse and cart, that the spurned lover, the other one, actually sprung an attack. And in this attack, he ended up fighting with the other love, and all three of them were killed. And unfortunately, she never lived, and is believed to still haunt the place. And there are rumours that she has been seen walking around, and even the story goes in the history that the Baron's son, which is one of the two lovers, the Baron actually had a door open at his house, and these three ghostly figures came in, including Abigail, and he was very surprised at this. Now, if there is any truth in this, and there is some history there with that, there is a chance that Abigail is still wandering around and it is possible that she is possibly visible in the grounds of Featherstone Castle. The building was in the ownership until the late 1700s, at which time the family then sold the building on to a James Wallace, who took ownership of the building. I believe James Wallace was an accountant at the time, but I'd have to check that. Another part of the castle's history came in the 1940s, where it became a training camp for American soldiers before the Second World War. It was an isolated place, so was ideal for training purposes. After a couple of years, this changed though. Went from a training camp to becoming a POW camp, to which Italian prisoners of war were first brought, followed by German prisoners of war. And due to its isolated nature, it was away from the view and secluded away. It stayed this way until just after the war ended, and some Second World War relics can still be found on the land there today. Lieutenant Colonel Vickers took over the location in 1946 and made it into more of a parole area, incorporating theatre and some entertainment while offering voluntary labour outside the camp to those who wanted it. There is a lot of history linked with those grounds, and this could explain some of the paranormal activity that's been mentioned from visitors to the location. The castle is now owned by a John Clark, who has been kind enough to host Wild North there, and it is much appreciated. The castle is set with lots of green scenery around, and is a peaceful location. The inside of the building is old stonework, with stone floors, and it takes you back years just walking into the building. Hopefully soon, we can all experience it again in person, but until then, this will be as close as we can be. And in this section of the video, I want to go through a few bits of equipment and other bits and pieces you can use if you're doing the paranormal or walk-arounds like in an evening. So after speaking about the history and everything we had with the castle, and going on about the walk around we did in the evening, we had a few bits of equipment set up that we were using, and it ended up being a good night. Quite a few people were interested, following us around, having a look for stuff, and it was enjoyable. And if that is the kind of thing that you want to get into, or something that you're interested in, then there's a few bits and pieces of equipment that you can use. Some of it you don't even have to pay a lot of money for, depending on what you want to do. I want to go through the equipment that I've been using, and basically I'll start off with the cheaper options that you can get, some you can even get for free, and then work up to the more expensive options that are available, and see what people are interested in. And there's plenty of scope out there for people who are either believers or non-believers. It's good to have that sort of opposition, so you can question stuff if you don't think something's really there, or if you don't believe in something. That's good to question stuff and make sure that you're checking to see that there's an explanation for it. And if there's an explanation for it, then that's good for fact checking against, to make sure that things, even if you've seen them, that it could be something that it isn't. So it could be that you've seen something, it could be a gust of smoke that's come from somewhere. And this is a good way of fact checking and making sure that all them bases are covered. So I want to start off with some free items that you can use. So one thing you can use is a mobile phone. There's plenty of stuff on the phone that you can get which are free apps. I've rolled one is basically set up with just free stuff. One that I use all the time is basically a ghost box that's on the phone, and what it does, it randomly sweeps through stuff, sounds a bit like a train, and it'll occasionally throw bits and pieces up. Now a lot of the times it's just gibberish. Occasionally you might get a word come through that means something. It could be a name, it could be linked to somewhere you're working or where you're at, and that word that comes through, if you can find a link to it that works, sometimes that could be the start of something to ask questions with. So like with this now, it's sweeping through, occasionally throwing a couple of bits and pieces out, and at some point it might come out with somebody's name, it might come out with a number, it might come out with something, it might come out with a word that you can link to. Once it starts doing that, then there's a chance that there could be communication there that you could ask for. Another thing you can do, and they have these on phones as well, is you have EMF detector apps, which are basically used for checking electric fields, basically electromagnetic fields, and because they say that spirit can interfere with and create electromagnetic field stuff, these are great to have because you can move them around or something. Like I put this next to the headphones that I'm using as a pair of microphones, and it's come up with a high electromagnetic thing because there's magnets in the speakers. So you could debunk that and say that's to do with the magnets on the headphones covering that. So you could go for a sweep round somewhere. There might be no electricity in the building you're in, and you could wave it around and you could see a spike of like magnetic field on there. And if there's a spike then there's no electricity, that could mean that there's something or someone there. And then it's a time to either ask a question using an app. So there's other ones on here you can get. There's little sweeping radio boxes that you can use, which basically scan through radio frequencies and stop every like quarter of a second between each channel. So occasionally you'll have words coming through, but these are subject to interpretation anyway. So anything from any phone apps or any devices like that, it's all subject to interpretation of the person who's using it. So you might hear something that makes sense, and it might mean something to you, but not mean anything to anyone else. It's a case of how you interpret it and how it works for you. Second device that I've got, which is also one of these not overly expensive, you can pick them up for 15, 20, 25 pounds, and that is a little voice recorder. Now you can get these ones off places like Wish and whatever else for about 15, 20 quid, or you can get more expensive ones like these ones for about 40, 45 pounds second hand, which are a bit more robust. And basically these here, you'll turn it on, it'll basically have a setup on there saying where you want to save your stuff to, and then you can set it up to do recording. So I can now go on this here, it's set for record, and then you can press a button and it should record. And this is my first time using this, so I don't know how it works. I'm still figuring it out. But yeah, and then basically what you'll do is you'll press the record button, it'll record something, and once it's recording, there you go, so you slide the slider up on this one and it'll start recording. So now it's recording my voice, it's recording whatever I'm saying, and if I was to ask a question and say, is anyone in the room with me, or is anyone in the area? And then you leave that gap, you leave about 5 to 10 seconds of gap, and in that 5 to 10 seconds of gap you could have something come through, something could answer, or you might not have anything. So like now that's there, I can go to play, so this is going to rewind back. So this is now that gap. So that's basically just recorded what I've said. It's doing recording, so it'll basically be able to pick up anything that's been said in the room. It could be by a human, it could be by something else. It's a good little device to have with you and just ask questions with, because you never know, something might come upon it. Third item, and these depend on what you're into, is a digital camera. You can use old film cameras, but the amount it costs to get films and stuff developed in buying the film themselves, it's not worth it. So just a basic digital camera. They're not that expensive. I mean, you can get cheap ones on this. This was about 130, and I've got this one because it does good low light, and you've also got a decent sized screen on the back. And you can have a manual setting on it, so you can turn the flash off. You can always use it with the flash or without. You can get basically a little infrared box that sits on the top of the camera, and you can use that on all the time. So when you're taking photographs, you don't need to have the flash. The infrared or ultraviolet LEDs light up the background, so when you're taking a photograph, it'll illuminate the area, and you might be able to pick up some stuff. What I can do is I will link some small photos and video clips and stuff in the background on here, so you can see a couple of clips and a couple of photographs I've had with digital cameras in the past, and you'll see what I mean. There is another option with cameras where you can get what's called a full spectrum camera. So that's one where the infrared filter that's inside over the sensor has been removed, and that means the infrared light can pass through freely. Photographs with these cameras gets a bit of a red hue on it, so if you're taking nighttime photographs, you'll see like a red tint to the photograph, but it's better for letting the infrared light in so that you can use it with the infrared light fittings a lot easier. And I've had a few good photographs with them in the past with stuff that's been unexplained, but that's a bit more expensive of an option. You can do it yourself, but it's not recommended. But just a normal digital camera, or even the camera on your mobile phone, works, and you can use these anytime, anywhere you want. The next option to go for, which is a bit more of an upgrade, and it's more because you'll need a tablet to go with this, or a half decent, well, basic laptop would work, but it's better to have one with a bit more memory to compensate. But you can use a Kinect camera setup, so either Kinect for the Xbox 360 or even the Kinect for the Xbox One, which you can get adapters for. And basically what this does, it creates something called an SLS camera when you're using a tablet or a computer with it, and it will do 3D mapping of a room. You don't need to have lights on because it has infrared sensors built inside it, so it uses the infrared to light up the objects in the room, and it measures the distance between the objects. So if you're using an SLS camera, it can show you the inside of the room without lights on, just using the infrared sensors, and it also can map stuff out. So there have been occasions, and this is what got people in the paranormal world interested in these, where people were using Xbox Kinect setups at home for playing video games with, and they'd have the one person in the room which would be mapped out as a stick figure using the Kinect, and then another stick figure would appear nearby them, and it'd be moving around a little bit and then disappear, and it wasn't the sensor that was causing the problem. They weren't too sure what it was, so people now have been using these and setting them up, and they were taken to paranormal rooms, houses and events and stuff, and they use one of these cameras to see if it can map out a stick figure, to say that there's possibility of something being in that room or in that building.
When we were last at Featherstone Castle, I ran a paranormal event there, and we basically set up some equipment, and we were going around a few of the rooms asking questions using infrared cameras and voice recording software to see if anything had come through. A couple of the rooms were interesting. We thought there might have been some bits and pieces in there, maybe some voices, some figures that we actually managed to catch on video using a Kinect camera. But the one thing that stood out for me, and it was an interesting one, and whether you believe in the paranormal or not, it's a good debating point, a good thing to talk about, because people have decisions. It's a good way of getting people into conversations. And I remember there was a few of us sat outside on the steps up to one of the side buildings, and there was a big doorway there. And we were sat there with this Xbox camera pointing at where this doorway was, under this arch. And there was about 6 or 7 of us just talking away. And just where the door was, at the bottom corner of the door, this stick figure appeared on the camera. And normally the camera on the Kinect maps out anything that could be a human or a body type figure as a stick figure. And this figure was looking like it was crouched down in the corner. Couldn't tell what it was. We were looking at it and trying to guess, trying to figure it out. And then something clicked. And as we were looking, one of the stick legs was kind of outstretched. And between us we discussed, and one of us mentioned it could possibly be a dog. And the more we looked at it, the more it looked like there was a dog sat guarding the front door of the building. Which would make sense, because this is one of these areas where years ago you would have had gamekeepers, people hunting, and they would have had guard dogs and hunting dogs that would have returned to the master, possibly would have sat outside on the doorstep. And this stick figure looked like a medium-sized dog, sat on the floor with one of its back legs outstretched. But it was there for a good couple of minutes, and then it just disappeared. Now, interesting thing was that there was 5 or 6 people there who saw this on the camera, and nobody was sure what it was doing. It was interesting to see that it became a talking point for the evening, that we were trying to figure out what it was and explain it, and trying to describe what it was, whether it could have been human, whether it could have been animal, until we came to the decision that it was more than likely what could be a spirit of a dog, if you believe in that. So it was an interesting evening, and if we go back again and we get to do this again, I would like to set up the camera again in the same place and see if we can't get the same thing to happen again. If we can get the spirit dog to come through again, if it's a spirit dog, then that'd be really impressive. But like I say, it's open to interpretation, so even if you do or don't believe in it, there's an option there to look at it and make up your own mind. And that's the good thing about paranormal and ghost stuff, that even if you do or you don't believe in it, at least the option's there for you to make up your mind and decide for yourself whether you believe in it or not. And if you do, then yes, you can explain what you think it is. And if you don't, then you can explain why you don't think it is and what you think it could be instead. And it's a great way of getting a conversation going and getting people to interact with each other. And that's what a lot of this is about, is getting people together, trying to learn a bit of history, and maybe get some excitement, something different, as opposed to the norm, and get some information and learn some of the history of the building as well at the same time. But yeah, that's the Kinect camera's a good one to have if you want to do this a bit more seriously. You can have one of them and you can set it up. You can get a battery pack that works with it, and you can extend it out with lots of different ways. You can even make a handheld one using an old tablet that's running Windows, the Kinect, and a battery pack set up with it, and just carry it around with you. I've seen a few programs where they do that. After that, then you're looking at the more expensive stuff that some of the paranormal groups use. So you're looking anywhere from the spirit radios, like the SBR7, I think it is, which is one of these handheld radios. It's like a sweeping radio. It just automatically scans between channels. I've seen them going on eBay for around £70 upwards, all the way up to the what they call REM pods, which are basically a little pod that you stick on the floor. It's got an antenna on it that's supposed to pick up any electromagnetic fields that go near it. So if any spirits are supposed to go near it, that will set off and starts flashing lights. They're around £200 to £300, and then these are the ones where you're starting to get into a lot more money. And if you're only doing this as a hobby, or you're doing it out of interest, you don't really need to spend that. You don't need to go along the end of having expensive equipment, when you can just use something like a mobile phone, or like I say, just even one of these, something as simple as a small voice recorder. Pick one up for £10, £15, £20 second hand online, or even you can even get the small tape dictaphones that you can use. They do the same job. And if you go in somewhere and you think there might be something there that could be paranormal, or you're just interested or intrigued, get something like that, or get an app on your phone and just spend 10-15 minutes in the area and just do some recording, or just do some baseline testing, see if anything comes up. And if it does, then maybe you can investigate it further with slightly better equipment, or stay there a bit longer and just keep using the equipment you've got and change it up a bit. There's plenty of different methods you can use, and there's plenty of equipment out there that you can use as well. It all does the same kind of stuff. It just depends on what kind of level you want to do the investigations at. So now you know the different types of equipment that are there, you can make up your mind on if you'd like to do this at one of the Wild North events, and if so, what part of it you would like to be interested in. So maybe voice recording, maybe one of the boxes that they use to try and communicate, maybe a video camcorder, which can be used to try and film stuff like orbs and energy lights. Or you could even use a Kinect camera with a small computer and see if you can't see a stick figure, or maybe even a shadow figure. And all these make for great talking points between people, and it gives people a great bit of discussion. So I want to thank you for joining me on this history and paranormal video. It's a shame we can't be doing this in person, but these things happen. So this is the next best thing, and let's hope for next year things can be better, and if they improve, people can actually join in and get involved with this paranormal stuff and history stuff in person. I would like to say thank you very much for watching. I hope this was informative and interesting for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm always available if anyone has any questions about anything. You're welcome to message me, and I will try my best to help. So thank you for watching, thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of the con. Bye!